Hello, 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 and a very warm welcome from the Vienna Center of Management Innovation and the Global Peter Drucker Forum. You can already see that a lot of people know how we're going to start these calls by posting where they are from. I'm very proud of the community. And this is actually what we want to start with now, because I'm always so fascinated by the global community of the Global Peter Drucker Forum. So I would like you to open the chat and answer a couple of questions for us, which is, where are you dialing in from? What time is it? And what is the view from your window? And I'm going to open the chat and read a little bit because I'm curious to see. So I can see someone saying hi from Paris. So to the technical team, if you can please open the chat for me. So we have people joining from Switzerland, from India, from Boston. Wow, and there are so many people that I'm almost not able to read the chat. I can see Prague, I can see Bangalore, I can see Vienna, I can see London. It's raining in London, Leipzig, California. The sun is coming. Please send some sun to us from Vienna. We have some very cold February weather here, March weather. Then we have Massachusetts, Göteborg in Sweden, Cologne, raining, New York, it's beautiful outside, Berlin, Chicago, Düsseldorf, Germany, Vietnam, 10 p.m. Props to you for being up so late. Rome, 8 a.m. Silicon Valley. Good morning to you, Hungary. Wow, such a global community. I'm gonna keep on checking the chat as I'm going to open the call. So once again, a very warm welcome from the Global Peter Drucker Forum for today's session. So today we're going to talk about the theme for the next 5 years, which is the next management, and also going to announce the topic for 2024. I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Franziska Graf, and some of you might know me from previous sessions. I'm really happy because I'm now a regular here at the Global Peter Drucker Forum. I'm a self-employed moderator, impact coach, as well as artist, and I'm super happy to be your host for today's session. So my role is to make you feel welcome, to open the session and to close the session. So once again, thanks for being here, and we are very, very excited. Just to lay down some ground rules for today's session, we are already around 300 people, so we would ask you to stay muted. We have a quite compact format for today. And I'm sure that there's going to be questions that are going to pop up during the interesting input that you're going to receive. And I will kindly ask you to post your questions in the chat, which then will be curated by us during the sessions. And at 5 p.m., we're going to have a short Q&A with some curated questions that are posed by you. And with this, my role as the host for the beginning is kind of over. And I'm very excited to introduce you to the chair for today's session, Johan Ross. And I'm going to invite Johan to the stage now. And I will see you at the end of today's session.
Thank you very much, Franziska.
You're very welcome.
It's nice to be here live from Vienna. And I am... in my daytime, I serve as the Chief Academic Officer of probably the most global business school in the world, HALT. And my nighttime job is to help a little bit with Drucker Forum and the Vienna Center. And I've been doing that for more than a decade now. So let me start with our promise to you here today. We have basically two promises to you. After this session, you will know more about the next management initiative and what we mean by that. And you'll also get a little bit of a flavor for the why, and hopefully a lot of the why and some of the what. That's the idea. And that will also be the design of today. The second promise is that you will know the topic of the 2024 Drucker Forum in November within the overarching theme of the next management. To deliver on our promises, we start with you. So when you registered here, and about 930 people registered, we asked you for some answers to two questions. And we've done some prep work on that. And 95% of you were good students. So we asked you about the why question. Why should we do this according to you? And this is the cluster, the second order clustering of the data. And there was a lot of data out there. And I must admit, I just didn't do it myself. I had some augmented help to do it in a couple of rounds. But this is what you said. We need to reframe it because we need a much more of agility, systemic agility in organizations, public and private. We also need much more focused human-centered management as approach to what we've done. And we need to be much more network and collaborative in our structures of institutions, private and public. And on the what should be reframed question, the clusters of your answers were also very similar to the overall idea here. So I've phrased this a little bit normatively, and the idea was, well, what we should do is to try to balance technology much more with human-centered management. We should not fear it, but we should balance this now. We should move towards what probably could be called servant leadership in various definitions in all of your data. And we must ensure that we have the bigger picture, our global common good at the core of what we're doing. So this is your answers to the questions. And this is also how we will organize things. So with this, I'd like to start with a why. And in fact, the very, very big why, the next management, as framed and introduced by the founder and president of Global Peter Drucker Forum and the Vienna Center, Richard Straub. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much, Johan. It's a great pleasure and really a joy to be here and to have you all participating in this call. The subject is obviously very important to us. We believe it is a crucial moment, I would say, even in world history. And it's the right time to think about this subject. And I will try to give you, as Johan said, the why from a very rather high perspective. And to start with a very high perspective, what question do you ask? How can I make the world a better place? I think everybody is thinking about it. The young generation is particularly worried about it, and rightly so. So when we deal with this subject, I think we need to go back also in history a bit in terms of where do we come from? And it's undeniable, since the Industrial Revolution, humanity has made big, big progress. It wasn't perfect, we know, but there was huge progress. It is a big success story. And part of this success story was what some called a social technology, the social technology of management. And management is also considered, this social technology is considered one of the most important social innovations of the 20th century, where it had the full impact. So, hence, we came to a point, and it's not so far, so long ago, at the late 80s, early 90s, we thought it's all done. We have now the perfect way to run the world. And some declared the end of history. And this end of history, obviously, was too early anticipated.
J'ai pas bien compris. Moi, je pense qu'il voulait voir quel argument il faut ajouter.
Il me parle d'une variable d'environnement, lui, mais moi, ça me dit rien.
Can you go on mute? Thank you. So some called it the end of history, but obviously this was an illusion, and this was some hype. Today, we have to admit that we need to repair institutions that are largely considered as broken. Broken in terms of performance and broken in terms of trust. And why are they broken? Because they are badly managed. And if I say this in a negative sense, I say at the same time, this may be the biggest opportunity of the 21st century. This may be, and you've seen some of the ideas around it already from the survey, this may be the point to find our way back to the human roots of what we do in management. Management is about achieving something, about performance. Management is about ideas and meaning. And we have this unique opportunity now to have management finally finding its human roots, but augmented by artificial intelligence, Web3, whatever new tools we may have in the coming years. And since with this end of history, some thought democratic capitalism has won the game forever. What could happen now is that in a difficult situation where we are currently in, we can give a second curve to democratic capitalism. And you know the concept of the second curve from our friend Charles Handy. So in this sense, I think we shouldn't be depressed. We have an opportunity that is bigger if we know how to address it. And we can, in fact, make the world a better place if we achieve what Drucker always said. A functioning society, a successful society needs well-managed institution and well-led institution. Leadership is becoming, obviously, ever more important. And this is what we are all about. It's not only about business, not only about any institution, but it's about society. In this spirit, we invite you to join us. Be part of this journey. You will hear more about it. And we're looking forward to work with many of you on this currently 5 years journey, but we'll see where it will bring us. So in this sense, thank you for your attention. And it's my pleasure now to introduce Michele Zanini and Tammy Eriksson. Michele is a long-term ally of the forum. He and Gary Hamel have been on this subject about why it's so important to make changes now to management. And Tammy Eriksson equally is connected to the forum since many years, and she has a special connection, even she had a personal connection to Peter Drucker in her way of thinking about leadership. So in this sense, Michele, over to you. You will lead the conversation for the next few minutes. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for setting the stage with such great insights and a really sharp call to action. And thanks for everyone for joining us today. And I'm delighted that we'll have the chance to build on some of these points with a very, very special guest, Tammy Eriksson. You probably all know Tammy, but let me just give you a bit of an intro. She's a renowned expert on organization, on innovation, and the future of work. She's authored several influential books and articles, including a McKinsey award-winning article on these topics. And she consults. She also has the practical experience of working with Fortune 500 companies, and her insights, it's no exaggeration to say, have helped shape the strategies and practices of organizations around the world. So Tammy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, that's kind, and it's a real pleasure.
All right. Well, listen, I wanted to start by giving some credit to Management 1.0, to management as we know it, because in many ways, our organizations exceed us, right? So if you were to tour a manufacturing plant, like a Tesla plant in Berlin, for instance, you'll be awestruck, right? But this complex choreography of humans and machines working in concert. And it's really hard also not to be impressed by the fact that chip manufacturing that power our devices now operate at the 3 nanometer scale, which is, by the way, the length at which our fingernails grow in 3 seconds, right? So that's pretty amazing, right? So we got to give organizations and Management 1.0 its due, but it seems to me that despite all these great accomplishments, our organizations are fundamentally not as capable as they can be and they frankly need to be, right? So I just wanted to get your take on this, Tammy. Is that a fair assessment? And if so, like, what are the kind of the capabilities that these organizations that are capable in some ways are actually still missing?
You know, I think it's a yes and. I mean, the fun thing about thinking about our organizations is that they are great at so many things. If you look back over the past century, we've learned how to develop scale. We've learned all kinds of things about managing for efficiency. We've learned how to just drive the, tiniest elements of cost out of our system. We're really good at those kinds of things. The question then becomes, are those the things we need to be good at in order to differentiate or excel in this century? And there I would say a resounding no. I mean, I think the challenge that companies are facing, whether they're in commodity industries or, highly specialized industries, it doesn't matter. It's across the board. Every company is today thinking about, how do I become more innovative, more collaborative, better able to sense my customers, et cetera. It's a different set of skills.
Okay, so you're saying it's, companies need to do what in America people say is walking and chewing gum at the same time, right? They, in a way, efficiency is important and almost like a table stake. You need to have it to compete, but you need to be capable of much more than that. So,
Yes.
right.
Yes, and the problem becomes, I think, if we think of it like, walking and chewing gum or something, maybe we have to invert which one we give the greatest priority to, because most of our organizations and leadership approaches are optimized around things like efficiency and scale. That's what we're fundamentally set up to do. And then we kind of tack innovation and those kinds of things around the edges like chewing gum. And that doesn't work.
Right. That's a good build on that metaphor. So let's take innovation as an example, right? Because in theory, large organizations, large companies are well equipped to be entrepreneurial, to be creative hotspots, right? They have lots of resources. They have thousands of talented employees, terabytes of customer data, very powerful brands that they can leverage in new ways. Right. So they have the ingredients to be innovative. And they also have, in a way, the understanding that they need to be innovative. If you look at surveys of that BCG and other consulting firms have run about how important innovation is, it's been for a long time a top 3 priority, and the number of CEOs who put it at the top has increased over time. So they're aware of the fact that this is something they need to do, but they're also quite unhappy. A recent McKinsey survey showed that 94% of executives are not happy with the innovation performance of their company. So how do you explain that disconnect, right, between resources and even kind of this openness to becoming more innovative and innovation capacity?
Sometimes I feel like people in organizations are kind of like perched on the edge of a maze. And the company says to them, we want you to innovate. But when they look at the path forward, it's got so many twists and turns and dead ends and roadblocks and things in their way that it becomes so difficult to do it. And that's really the key. Our organizations are optimized for efficiency, which means things like specialization and silos and hierarchical communication. And innovation requires the exact opposite of that. And so unless we're willing to really upend the way we think about how we design organizations and how we lead organizations, people, yes, you've got the raw material, you can see it over there, there's what I need, but to get there is so difficult. And that's what people are facing.
Yeah. Yeah. In a way, you need to have almost like DNA level intervention, right? Otherwise, it will always remain a bit of a hobby or an outpost that never goes into anything that is meaningful. And I think the story of innovation accelerators or incubators, shows that, they are appendages that don't seldom add any value. So can you maybe, I know we don't want to get into too much of the what, that's for later, but what are some of the big shifts, practically, that these organizations need to make? Like, how do you make innovation or creativity or collaboration kind of a natural act, right, as opposed to a happy accident?
Yeah. I've always said innovation is at its heart. It's the combination of two ideas that have never before been combined. That's innovation. That's the simplest definition. So right in there, you can see a couple of things. You've got to have diversity. So you've got to have different ideas. If you're in a silo with everybody thinking the same, it's not going to happen. You've got to be able to bring those ideas together easily. They've got to be combined. So you've got to have the collaborative networks. You've got to have the agility that allows you to do it. And you've got to want to do it. People have to care. They have to, choose to do it. And there comes in our human-centric management. I was struck by the results of the survey, which put those three things as a top why. The whys were agility, human-centric management, and collaboration. I'd like to just challenge everybody for a second and suggest that those aren't really the whys. Those are closer to the hows. The hows are we have to be more agile, we have to be more collaborative, we have to be more human-centric. The whys are because we need innovation, because we need people to care, because we need thinking-related activities to succeed.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. We almost need to go back to first principles. Can you maybe unpack, what are some of the most kind of taken for granted assumptions about people working in organizations that we don't even question because we feel like they're kind of wallpaper, they're just, things that we assume to be eternal truths that we ought to challenge when it comes to innovation? What are those some kind of self-limiting beliefs that we hold or that we teach people in business school about how our organizations work that are actually detrimental to the organization, therefore should be challenged a little bit more explicitly?
There's so many. I think one is that, we as leaders or managers need to tell people what to do. We need to assign them tasks. One of my big, missions is to get companies to be more open to allowing people choice, because if people choose for themselves, they're going to be more vested in it and so forth and so on. Another one is this obsession with what we do as a unit of time. I think one of the most dangerous metrics today is efficiency, utilization. And we get obsessed with, what's happening within a unit of time, even though all of us know deep in our hearts that when people are working virtually and in teams around the world, it's a ridiculous metric. We don't know what people are doing within a unit of time. So we've got to come up with different metrics, like measuring the quality of the outcome. We could go on. There are so many things that are just infused in our system. We have to measure time. We have to tell people what to do, etc. That that ownership is preferable. We often have that as an assumption. There's so many that are infused in that we need to challenge within this 5-year Drucker process.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And let me maybe just push on this a little bit more, Tammy, because it seems to me some of the things you're saying that we're saying in a way have been said before. They've been said for a long time. And you can go back to Mary Parkett Follett in the 1920s, like 100 years ago. You can go to even, Maslow and McGregor and Argyris and all these greats in management who were pointing us to the need for, searching for a more human-centric activity model of management, right? Where leadership was more about, Johan mentioned servant leadership, how that's not a new idea, right? That's been around for decades. So, and even when it comes to innovation, how many books have been written about innovation over the last 30 years, right? And companies still kind of suck at it. So like, why are we stuck? Why, and more importantly, what do we need to do differently so that we get unstuck and we do make progress?
Well, I completely agree with you, Michaela. There have been people over time who've, pointed out the things we need to do. I don't know if they've ever reached critical mass or gravity that's gotten a lot of people behind them. But, I would say my short answer to your question would be that we continue to apply industrial ideas to managing thinking processes. So, I've had a career working with companies on innovation and R&D management, and sometimes, frankly, it'd make me cry because companies insist on putting in place defined processes and monitoring various steps and using, efficiency metrics. And those things just kill it. So, yes, we care about these things, innovation, but we don't really step back and take the courageous step of managing in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the amazing thing to me is that this is despite the fact that there is real value in taking innovation seriously and creating these kinds of empowering, innovation friendly structures and processes. And yet, despite the fact that there isn't a profit motive, I mean, in the public sector may be different, but in the private sector, you're amazed to see how little take up there is of this. And so maybe this will lead us to maybe the last kind of question, Tammy, which is, it seems to be the problem is systemic, right? It's not about an individual organization, you know, not doing the right thing, but it's basically a set of beliefs, a set of structures that in a way push companies to be more like each other than they're different and to conform to this kind of industrial era model, right? And so yes, you can try to operate in a different way, but it's almost like driving with a car from the continent in the UK. You know, you can kind of do it, but it's hard, and so you don't necessarily stick with it. At some point, you'll change your car, right, to fit the you know, the right way of driving and moving around the country. So I wanted to maybe get you to reflect on what are those big barriers, right, that are kind of shared, that many companies or institutions are subjected to, and how do we get around them? You know, and what would be, you mentioned metrics, and maybe that's one of them. But what are some of the most promising avenues for making progress across institutions, so that, you know, every organization, every progressive CEO or executive isn't fighting on their own to improve their structures and systems?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a difficult question. I mean, I think that, you know, what you and Gary and others are doing to help people become more aware of these issues and the need of developing a sense of cohesiveness that we're all, in a sense, kind of changing together is one important step. I was going to say somewhat facetiously, and I really don't mean this because I don't want to, you know, insult anyone, but I'd say maybe one of the biggest roadblocks is, you know, people over a certain age. You know, we baby boomers grew up being taught that one way of doing things was right. And so even though we know young people who like doing it a different way, we often don't step back and think, how do I make this a broader application within my organization? It's around changing our mindsets. And I think we can do it, actually. I may be more of a perennial optimist that, you know, I see signs where people are changing the way they run their departments within companies, the way they run various, you know, project teams. And I think we are seeing a lot of progress being made along these lines, but it has to be at the company level to remove those roadblocks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think people can change even if they are of a certain age or have tenure. I've seen this happen, and you know, they realize that if they start to play a different role, it's actually liberating for them as well. It's not a zero-sum game, right? They get to do more interesting things, because I think a lot of people don't like to micromanage or tell people what to do. And some people get off on that, but most people don't. And so, like, how do we, you know, solve, you know, the dilemma though of doing this at scale so that people are, you know, renegotiating their roles and responsibilities in concert with others, right? This is not an isolated activity. So hopefully, you know, we'll spend more time and effort thinking about these kinds of bold moves, both at the level of the individual organization and more broadly, you know, as in our society. But for now, Tammy, I think we're running out of time, so I'll leave it here unless you have other things you wanted to add.
Oh, always fun talking about this. And I do think there are a lot of practical ideas that will come out in further discussions. Excellent.
And I hope the audience has found this a valuable conversation. I hope they're also asking questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll come back to those towards the end of our time. But for now, let me just stop here and hand it over to Johan.
Very much, Michele and Tammy, for your high-level reflections over the issues, some of the zombie concepts, I'd say, and some of the dilemmas and trade-offs of what we're facing, of course, in management. So thank you for this high-level perspective. In November, at the Drucker Forum, Richard Straub ended the forum with a slide announcing this initiative. And at that time, this was very much work in progress, and it continues to be work in progress. But he used this slide, and it's exactly the same words on it. And when I look back at both what you said, Tammy and Michele, and what we heard from also the clusters of the data that you provided as participants, I think this has aged pretty well over the few months that have been there, but it's still work in progress. So this is sort of the foundation that we're continuing to refine. And I see from the many questions in the chat, and you should continue to put that in, and comments as well, that again, we're not totally wrong here. It seems like we're pushing in the same direction, which is great. So from this high-level perspective, we have also promised you a little bit of like, what about the implications for practice here? A little bit of a flavor for that. So to this end, we have invited three amazing people, three amazing practitioners who we've asked to give sort of a short statement. And then we'll see if we can just talk a little bit after that. So I've asked them to do a 3-minute statement, and then we'll have a question. And the first one up is Claudio Fernandez Aros, who has a long decades of experience with people management. He's been an executive in Egon Zehnder, and currently he's now teaching at Harvard, particularly on family business matters, which we all know is all about people issues, or mostly at least. So with that, Claudio, I'll invite you for your 3-minute claim, please.
Thanks very much, Johan. And you're emphasizing my many years. So I'm probably a dinosaur about to become extinct. I'm in Buenos Aires. In Argentina, many of the dinosaurs used to live. All right. So in terms of my 3-minute statement, Peter Drucker, 39 years ago, wrote a wonderful HBR article about how to make people decisions. And at that point, he was properly quote mentioning that, managers, leaders spend most of their time making people decisions, hiring people, promoting people, developing people. And he said that nothing is more important than this because of the lasting consequences of people decisions, because of their impact, because they are so difficult to undo. But he also made the point that in his view, at most just 1/3 of people decisions were the right ones. My point is that I think that the imperative for the coming years is going to be to become much better at making people decisions, fundamentally for one reason. Research shows that the reason why you make people decisions is because the difference between an average performer and a star is large and grows exponentially with the complexity of the task. So for example, if you look at an old traditional blue-collar worker in an assembly line, you have a distribution of productivity, you have average workers, and the top workers would be 40% more productive than the average. If you go to more complex jobs, such as an insurance salesperson, the difference between an average performer and a star performer is 240%. If you go for a more complex job, such as a computer programmer, the difference between an average performer and a top worker, the distribution becomes with a much wider spread, and the difference is 1,200%. And same thing happens, for example, with the leaders of consulting firms. And the point is that in a world of knowledge worker, this spread in performance grows exponentially with the complexity of the task. And the opportunity cost of not surrounding ourselves with the best and helping the best become even better each day is enormous. Richard was properly mentioning that in his view, institutions are broken because they are badly managed, and that this is perhaps the greatest opportunity. I couldn't agree more with him. And I think that the major imperative is to become much better at making great people decisions and helping the best become even better each day.
Claudio, for making that claim. And this is what I've asked them to do, that we should be able to put an exclamation mark behind what they say. So let me ask you a question. In this age of AI or generative AI, what would be the implications of these new tools for what you're saying? Could one even argue that it will be, this difference will actually be evened out, or on the contrary to what you're saying, using AI tools for very, what should we call it, more complex knowledge work?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So on the one hand, jobs are becoming more complex, and therefore the spread of performance is larger. Now, the second part of your question is, okay, what's the role of technology, AI, and so on and so forth? Now, it will help as a filter for making decisions, particularly filtering the hard experience, educational achievements, even some IQ type of competencies. Now, it still won't be able to help when you are judging character, when you are judging values, and when you are assessing soft competencies, such as emotional and social intelligence-based competencies. The way in which we get to know ourselves, we get to manage ourselves, we get to understand others, and we get to properly relate to all of them. 80% of this differentiating competence between average leaders and top leaders are based on emotional and social intelligence. And this, the best way to assess them is still based on reliable reference checks, speaking with people who have seen the person in action, and good interviews. Because what you get in social media, it will always be tainted by the bias of looking good, by our lack of objectivity when assessing our soft skills, and people being afraid of writing against someone for the risk of being sued because of that. So the role of the human person for making these people decisions will become ever more important.
Thank you for arguing with me, Claudio. The bias of looking good. I love that expression. So with that, I'd like to invite our second speaker, and that is Tonjin Ipen. He's a former Drucker Challenge winner, and that's something extraordinary. He is an author, and he's writing about particular things that I'm sure he will mention here. He's also a futurist in a think tank now. And with that, Tonjin, I will invite you for a 3-minute statement.
Okay, thank you so much, Johan. So two of the themes that Peter identified in the Drucker Forum about mixed management was innovation beyond efficiency and also augmenting human creativity, which interestingly was the title of our HBR article in June, July. And I think these are fundamentally related issues. And I think what connects them is the idea of balancing efficiency and resilience, or how do we actually achieve efficient resilience, which I think is going to be one of the major concerns, not just at the organizational level, but also at the individual worker level. So my co-author, Dan Finkenstand of the US Air Force, and I have spent over 3 years studying strategies in nature and trying to understand how that could be applied to human organizations. And we found, certain very simple but powerful ideas that almost nobody has sort of highlighted, I think, in the past. And something very simple is this trade-off between efficiency and resilience. And it's there all over nature. We see that in organization. And I was really happy when I saw Antonella May-Pochler, who will be following us, explaining this in the terms of the role of redundancy. And efficiency is always about, commonly about eliminating redundancy, whereas resilience often requires maintaining it along with repair systems and reinforcement. So this is a challenge that organizations have to gear for. So how do you sort of work on efficiency, but also make sure that resilience is maintained? But my concern is not just about organizations. It's beyond that. And I see the same challenge, that we are facing, in preparing the workforce of tomorrow. So, I was an academic, and I see this, increasing concern in universities as well, because in the age of generative AI, this should come to the forefront of our thinking about how to prepare young people for the knowledge workplace of tomorrow. Because on one hand, we want to leverage these tools, these so-called generative tools, which are seemingly creative in nature, that can help us write, analyze, and program. But how do we do that without losing the critical resilience, so that when these systems break down, because these are complex systems or don't work as planned, we still can function as a society, and our people can still thrive. So I think this is going to be the major challenge for me, I think, from a organizational perspective, human resource perspective. So how do we incentivize our young people? How do we incentivize organizations to promote systems so that while we can take advantage of these tools, these so-called creative tools, but double down on creativity, artistic capability, analytic skills, programming skills, all the things that have sort of contributed to the current success of human society, and also what also makes us human. So I think this is going to be a major challenge in the coming days for us.
Thank you very much, Tojin. Let me ask you, what would you say are the main implications of what you're saying? And I'm also putting in what you're writing into that, namely your inspiration from natural system. What is sort of the main implication for management practice, would you say, of taking that perspective in view of what you just said?
That's right. So I think there are two things. I think the first is, how do you sort of enable, or incentivize people to pick up skills and capabilities that may not immediately show results, right? So in a world where 90% of time you're not using these certain skills, and because when you're working at high levels of efficiency, maybe this is not required, but you see these skills coming into play when things break down, or maybe once in 5 years. So how do you provide that kind of incentive for people, for organizations to hire individuals who have those capabilities, but also to promote and make sure that these people succeed in organizations, people who are more resilient? That's the first thing. And I think related to that, how do we make sure that our training systems, our universities are also not ignoring these core capabilities that I think are so fundamentally human, right? In the rush for sort of, taking advantage of the tools that are available right now.
Thank you, Tojin, for that reply. And we will quickly, with no further ado, go over to the third person we've invited, and that's Antonella May Hochler, who is a former executive in the consulting world in BCG for many, many years. She's also been the leader of the Austrian Chancellor's think tank about the future of Austria. And she's now sort of a professional board member. And to shock you a little bit, we brought an avatar of her here to Vienna. So she's here live. Yes, she exists. Yes. So you have 3 minutes, Antonella.
So wonderful. So what are we confronted with? The global scale and complexity and interrelatedness of issues have created much stronger pressure to bring together public sector and private sector. So they should work much more closely together. However, the problem is that these two sectors are going more and more apart. And why are they going more and more apart? Because there are two major dichotomies. The first one is the dichotomy of speed, and the other one is a dichotomy of, I would say, in a Max Weber sense, of ethical underpinning. Let me put it in, just clarify a bit. I just show you a little picture, and I tried to draw it, and I hope you can see it. You can see it. There are 4 circles. On one side, you have leading, the other one is administrating, and then the upper circles are public, and the lower circles are private. So you have on the one side, in each of these circles, there is a lot going on, where politicians who are confronted with local decision makers, local electorate, but are facing international global challenges. On the admin side, you have policymakers who are confronted with increasing challenges in understanding the regulatory needs and in trying to live what they are living for, i.e. making sure that everybody complies. So we have on the one side this public servant who are decelerating, becoming always slower because they want to slow down because they cannot catch up with what is going on. On the private side, we have a total different development. The managers, the ones who are administrating companies, are faced with a change from industrial age management to a change to AI-based management, artificial intelligence-based management. So they are accelerating more and more. And the leaders in this, in the private sector are used to work more and more with complex issues and bring things together. So we have a very, very diverging element. We have different speeds between public and private sector. Clearly, the private sector accelerating, the public sector decelerating. And we have different orientations, one more with an ideology-based approach, the politicians, and the managers with a evidence-based approach, ideally in the Max Weber sense, with Verantwortungsethik, ethics of responsibility. So how do we bridge this? And I think to bridge this, we need the next management. And I think, this is something that we might clarify in a couple of Q&As.
So Antonella, I'll come in from this side now and ask you one question. And that is the dynamics between the leader and the administrator, to me, seems to play into the notion of purpose-driven leadership, right? The politicians are ideology-driven, we hope. Isn't that just being purpose-driven? And what about then purpose-driven administration?
So, I mean, first of all, the questions, the difficult questions come always from the left. That's the first observation. But I mean, apart from this, I think, the dynamics between the, when you say we hope that the politicians are ideology driven, I'm not so sure if they should be only ideology driven. They should have a strong responsibility orientation, and their administration should be supporting them in this. And at the moment, I see strong shortcomings. And I think, this is something that if we want to bridge the needs that we have between this, bringing together these four circles, to bring them together, we need to invest in capabilities, which was mentioned before. We need to invest in collaboration, find other ways of working together. Cannot be the case that we only have increasing lobbying costs, because this is the only way for the private sector to interact with the public sector. I think that can, or we have on the other side outsourcing of public activities like outsourcing of education or outsourcing of warfare, which we're seeing also now increasingly. So this cannot be the right dynamic. We need therefore to invest in capabilities, in collaboration, and in the end, trying to find a common ground, a common orientation, which means, we see what the issues are that we need to solve together. So I think, you need also a different form of communication between the two parties.
So perhaps the new public management should be retired, and we should have a next public management as well.
For sure, and we should have a lot of joint learning where we are together in workshops, and public servants and managers work together and learn from each other, because both sides tend to underestimate the other side and also in their mind have preconcepts that are not helpful.
Thank you very much, Antonella, for this.
Thank you.
And thank you, the three of you, for offering your statements, which I think is super valuable. So I now have the job to try to say something meaningful about what we've said so far. That's not very easy, but I have reflected over what you said before. And Michele and Tani, remember, they said something about nothing new, or I shouldn't say that, nothing new under the horizon, but they referenced a number of very great thinkers and authors and scholars from the last century. But I think we can go even further back. When I look at some of these terms, values, people, servant leadership, bigger picture, community, sharing across, taking responsibility, ethics, I see something that resonates deeply with ancient philosophy. Being a modest mini student of Aristotelian ethics, I recognize some of these terms: metis, eudaimonia, polis, phronesis, virtuous cosmopolis. This is not just Aristoteles, but others as well. There's a lot of these deep thoughts from how ancient world functioned and what it needed, what was required to be a leader at that time of the polis that resonate a lot with what have been said today, what we've heard today. So in a sense, of course, there's a lot of a new twist to it, but I do think there is a timeless relevance of some of these concepts. You could even say, why did we forget about this? What happened? And why do we have to say a next management and move towards that? So perhaps we just forgot. With that, I'd like to shift over to our second promise, and that was for you to learn about what is the topic of the 2024 Drucker Forum in November. And I know you're super excited. All of you are on here today. You can hardly wait, but I will not introduce it, but I will introduce Julia Kirby, who is our curator of the program. And Julia will share with you, in a sense, the reasoning behind the super exciting topic for Drucker Forum 2024. Over to you, Julia.
Okay, thank you, Johan. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. I feel like I now get the pleasure of serving the dessert or maybe putting the icing on the cake of this event, and because it's to announce the theme of our next Drucker Forum in November. And so we've been talking so far about this 5-year program to accelerate the shift to what we're calling the next management. And that is really this large scale effort that sits at a level above all the various activities, you know, the conference and the research agenda of the Vienna Center for Management Innovation and our annual Drucker Challenge essay contest that we run for young professionals and students and other activities. But anyway, one of the elements that we will align with this agenda, you know, we'll pull under that umbrella theme, will be the content of our next several annual Drucker Forums. And I suspect that everyone here, or most everyone here, has been to one or more of these terrific gatherings in Vienna and probably knows the history of them. They began in 2009 when Richard and Ilse Straub wanted to honor the centenary of Peter Drucker's birth in Vienna and to bring Drucker's widow, Doris, back to what was also her hometown for that occasion. No one knew then that what was intended to be a one-off celebration would turn into this annual event. And more importantly, this ongoing, vibrant community that has this shared interest in engaging with, you know, the biggest management issues of our time year after year. But so part of the announcement that I'm making today under this umbrella of the next management is that we will, for the next several years, focus one at a time on the biggest challenges of running organizations and explore what next looks like within each of those areas. So every year we're going to take stock of how it has been done and highlight how that traditional way of managing now falls short given new conditions and capabilities. And most importantly, we're going to showcase innovative solutions that are part of or that point the way toward the next better way of managing in that realm. So I know there's a slide we can put up here, but for this first edition of that series, we're going to be focusing on what, you know, I think maybe the most famous area of Drucker's interest, and that's the realm of knowledge work and knowledge workers. So as you may know, Drucker coined the term knowledge worker. And he did so because he was observing the wholesale shift going on from the industrial manufacturing era to the era of, you know, not just service-based, but knowledge-based businesses and organizations especially in the world's leading economies. So he knew that the prevailing practices of management had, you know, they'd all been devised in this age of industrial manufacturing. when the objective was, efficient production, maximum asset utilization of, property, plant, and equipment. It was all about kind of achieving the promise of scale efficiency as you cranked out the goods that large populations of people needed and wanted, as as these middle classes grew and people gained prosperity. But he also saw that the management practices that were geared to raising the performance of manufacturing operations were not the ones you would necessarily rely on if your goal was to raise the performance of a knowledge-intensive concern, like, say, a bank or an insurance company or an advertising agency or a government agency or a nonprofit organization. And so those kinds of organizations were increasingly where most people worked and where most managers needed to figure out how to accomplish objectives and keep raising performance. So just to quote Drucker, because he said it very plainly, he said the most important contribution management needs to make in the 21st century is to increase the productivity of knowledge work and knowledge workers. So in other words, as a manager, to figure out how to do your job well, as someone who's entrusted to raise the performance of an organization, you would need to rethink the management of work. So this topic of the next knowledge work, it's also the right topic of this year's forum because it is so fundamental to our just determination to reassert that management is a fundamentally human-centered role. The job of the manager is to assemble people with different and complementary strengths and combine and give direction to their efforts so that they can collectively achieve important objectives that they all believe in and that none could achieve on their own. So Drucker, more than anyone, understood that management was as much about appreciating human psychology as it was about having an engineer's knack for process design or for technology application. It's really a role that's about realizing human potential. So I just said that we will look at how some of the long-established traditional ways of managing are no longer equal to the challenges of the current world. Because the fact is that conditions have changed further since Drucker coined the term, because that was 50 years ago. That was in the 1970s. And it's arguable whether management ever made much progress with the challenge that Drucker articulated. I mean, if you look at, in many ways, people who produce value with their brains today are still being managed, just like the people who produce value with, their brawn instead of their brains. People still, for example, get managed as workers who need to show up at work at a certain time in the morning and go home at a certain time in the evening, and managers or go back to their non-work lives at a certain time in the evening, and managers just assume that they're being productive in the time that elapses in between. But even though we were making only really slow progress toward new management frameworks for knowledge work, a few things have happened in recent years that really are changing the game again. And first of course is the lurch forward that artificial intelligence has taken. And the very broad availability of AI tools now that can be applied in workplaces. And those tools are now automating many intellectually challenging tasks. And so
Okay. Thank you very much, Julia, for that introduction. I know everybody's excited about getting on to thinking about what the next knowledge work means. And we've heard a lot of people here say things about the next management today, and they're all, well, they're all humans. We didn't invite any avatars or AI tools to this, but I played with AI tools, and I inserted the abstract that we have for the next knowledge work now into some renowned AI tools last night. And I'm going to show you an image, a horrific image of what this AI tools actually came up with as an image for the next knowledge work as specified in the text. So the task was to develop an image that could really speak to CEOs about the next knowledge work, and another image that could really speak to management professors about the next knowledge work. And I won't comment upon it so much. I think you get the message of that there is hope for us humans to develop something that is way more interesting, way more better than this. And of course, these AI tools, the generative AI tool, is about garbage in, garbage out. So if this is what comes out of the pre-trained generative AI tools, I'm a little bit worried what's in there to be pre-trained about, which means we have a lot of things to do to ensure that we are all of the things we talked about today, human-centric, servant, innovative, managing the trade-offs, and not the least ethical in what we do. So with that image, which we want to forget, it's a really scary image, as somebody is saying right now, but that's a true image generated by the data that's out there, right? With this, I'll introduce, I welcome back Franziska, our host, to close this part of the event. So with that, Franziska, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Johan. Yes, very interesting session, and I tried my best to look through the chat a little bit. And I have two questions for the Q&A, and the first one is for Tammy. So Tammy, you got the question from Ada McCormack. Are we in a post-transformation world where organizational transformation is not enough? What do you think about that question?
I'm sorry, do I think organizational transformation isn't enough? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very perceptive question because I don't think it's enough, because it does extend beyond an individual organization. You know, one of the challenges that I confront regularly in working with companies is companies who are located in a political or union environment where the kinds of changes that we talk about making would be impossible. One of the biggest limitations I think that we face in moving in the directions that we need to move is the existence of a social safety net. I personally believe countries that have stronger social safety nets actually have an advantage going into this century over countries that have weaker social safety nets. So I would, for example, and I'm obviously an American, I think the US has one of the weaker positions going into this century because of the weak social safety net that we provide our citizens. So I think there are lots of issues like that that we need to discuss that are much broader than corporations alone.
Yeah, so it would be important to take a very systemic view on the challenge.
Absolutely.
Thank you for answering our question. The next question I have is for Tojin. So it was very interesting how you talked about efficiency versus resilience and balancing the two things. And you mentioned creativity as a way to achieve resilience. And I was wondering in general, what are other capabilities, soft skills that we need to invest in order to achieve more resilience?
Sure. I think the ability to plan scenarios and think of scenarios, futuristic thinking is important, and also I think something that people don't recognize so much is managing attention, right? So this is something that was surprising to us in the sense that most of the time we think that all attention is good, but what we found out was that in many cases, reducing attention is almost always a powerful strategy, both at an individual level as well as an organizational level.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I was recently at a training session for trainees that just entered a company, and the feedback they gave me is that one of the skills they definitely need is how to manage their attention. So I can second that. Thank you for the comments. And this kind of closes the Q&A session. And I would now like to invite you to open your chat once again. We invited the term of an ice closer today, icebreaker, now it's an ice closer. And for that, I would kindly ask the technical team to show the slide. And our question for you is, what's one thing that gets you excited about our next theme for the next 5 years, the next management? Looking forward to reading your, an ice maker. I'm just reading an ice maker. That's also good. So once again, what's one thing that gets you excited for the next theme, the next management? Anti-fragility, self-managed teams, evolving thinking into action, new language for solutions needed, leadership of link. I'm going to have to read up on that. Human centricity, humane management, once again. Embracing disruption, human-centered, a lot of human-centered, forward-looking, socially responsible management. Holacracy, interesting. Tribe setup versus silo setup, feeding into holacracy. Pursuit of happiness, the reconciliation of private and public management. Antonella sparked some food for thought here. Repurposing. Entering a new set of skills, making highly functional the new standard. Seconding holacracy, healthy climate, inclusivity, human respect, market-based organizations. So as the answers keep feeding in, actually, this is a very good also link to the next thing, because of course we are very excited at the Global Peter Drucker Forum to also hear your thoughts on the next management. And you will receive a follow-up email for today's call with all the information, as well as information how you can engage and how you can actually also share your thoughts. And I guess also this chat and your answers here will be very valuable input for the curating team here behind the scenes. So I'm just reading the chat that came in the meantime. Fulfillment, right organizational culture, distinguishing management and leadership. Thank you so much for leaving us your comments. They will be read and studied in more detail afterwards. And with this, we come to the end of a very brief but really interesting session. And I want to invite next to me. And with this, we are closing the call. Johan, do you have a last message that you want to leave?
I have, and it's going to be on the slide, and the message is very clear, and it's what Julia said before also. Join us in Vienna. Here is the QR code where you can register. And as you know, you can always channel your comments. We'll send something out to everybody, or somebody will send something out to everybody. So you can continue the conversation and continue to give inputs to the people working on this, which is a whole group of people here. So with that, it feels a little bit like the Eurovision Song Contest. We don't have a winner, but it's been great working with you.
Yeah, thank you, Johan, too. And thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to everyone who joined from all over the world, who got up really early, stayed up really late. And we're excited to see you in Vienna soon and to read from you. All the best.
What do you say? Cheers.
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 Prost. Danke. Bye-bye.